Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Kristen of the Good Doctors of Abbey Research, and we here at Abbey Research exist to educate about empathy and empower inclusive communities. And essentially what that means is that we really like to help people get along a little bit better, and not in a kumbaya kind of way, but in a way that we really dig into what makes each of us, so that we can understand each other better and do life in a richer way. This video series is part of that mission. It's called Welcome to My World, and I spend a little bit of time with somebody who isn't me, which is everybody, and who has a piece of their life that I don't necessarily experience. And I ask them to teach me about it so that they teach you about it too. And today is no exception. I am joined by a childhood friend, which is so exciting, Rachel McCarter. Rachel is the owner and chief editing officer of Leap Results, a writing and editing business that helps clients to engage their audience and achieve success. Rachel is the mother of 10-year-old Avery and 7-year-old Aidan. Oh, I love those names. In 2015, at the age of 5, Avery was diagnosed with celiac disease, an autoimmune condition that causes inflammation and damage to the small intestines when gluten is consumed. Rachel is here today to talk with us about raising a child with celiac disease and the gluten-free lifestyle. And I think this is one of those things that gets maligned or made jokes about a whole lot. So I can't wait to learn from you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to be here and talk about our world.
Yeah, because honestly, it's definitely one I know I don't experience at all. So I'm grateful you're willing to peel back your curtain. So besides that intro, is there anything else that you'd like to kind of tell us a little bit about yourself before we dive in?
I don't think so. I mean, we've been on this journey for about 5 years now, a little over 5 years. So, and it really is a journey, because when you start out, you like you, I knew nothing about celiac disease and didn't have anyone. I have distant relatives who have celiac disease, but it wasn't really in my world. So every year, we've learned new things and continue to learn, like every other parent with a child with celiac.
Or I'm sure every other parent, full stop. I'm sure you have to learn about your child without celiac a lot too. And
True. Yeah.
Avery's body adds a complication. So yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
So what was it like? What kicked off this process? How did you guys start the journey? Was he really ill for a long time? Or if I could ask?
Yeah. So if I think back, Avery, she would occasionally get belly aches. So I was, a full-time working mom. She was in daycare. And right around, pre-K, so right before kindergarten, we switched daycares because I switched jobs.
Okay.
And the daycare that we went to was providing food every day. And so the belly aches that were occasional were every single day. And so she was telling me, Mommy, my belly hurts, my head hurts, my legs ache. And I thought, oh, that's growing pains. That's maybe you ate something that didn't agree with you. But I happened to work with, at the time I switched jobs, to a position that had like 4 people with either celiac disease or gluten intolerance. So I was learning a lot just from being around them. And so when I went to the pediatrician to talk with him about it, I said, well, why don't we test for this? Because I'm learning about it and it could be. And the test came back. It's called the celiac panel that you do for blood work. It came back very positive. It measures the antibodies in your blood that are produced when gluten is consumed. So someone with celiac disease has like really a lot of those antibodies, because gluten is like a foreign invader in your body. So your body is producing these antibodies to like attack and, protect your body. So so her blood work was really high. And then the next step then is an upper endoscopy. So he sent us to a pediatric GI, and she had the upper endoscopy, and it showed that villi in her small intestines were damaged. And that, affects everything. It affects your body's ability to absorb nutrients. It causes like an iron deficiency. Avery had this little like bloated belly and these like, skinny limbs, which is a sign of a child with celiac disease that I didn't know. Because it's like the malnutrition.
I say, because I would associate that with malnutrition, but of course celiac is malnutrition the way you just explained it, which I didn't realize. Okay.
Right. Yeah. So, so from there, I mean, we had the upper endoscopy and she was diagnosed, and then we were sent out into the world, go forth with a gluten-free diet. And we just, didn't really know, what that looked like. And so we learned over the years that not only is gluten literally in everything, because it's a protein that's found in like wheat, rye, oats, barley, and malt. And it's a binding protein and has such elasticity to it that it's used in like salad dressings. It's used in spices even. You can find it in frozen vegetables. You can find it in any packaged thing pretty much. So that was a learning curve. And then because she has celiac disease, we have to be very careful with cross contamination. So gluten sticks to things. So we had to like totally redo our kitchen, throw out the colanders, throw out the plastic or wooden, cookware, any scratched metal we had to replace. So pans that, because gluten will stick in there and then Avery gets sick. So redoing the blood work, we were kind of monitoring that because we want her numbers to come back into normal ranges again, which they have. But it was a process because, that was not my way of growing up, of cooking, of grocery shopping, checking all the labels. So it really was a big learning curve.
I can't imagine. I want to ask a couple more questions about learning curve, but let me return really quick to something. You said celiac or gluten intolerant.
Right.
I would think that those are kind of the same thing. They are not. Do you happen to know the difference?
Yeah, so I'm reading a really great book right now called Gluten Freedom, and it's written by a doctor who really was responsible for the education and just the awareness of celiac disease in the States. He worked overseas and was working with kids with celiac, and it's just really interesting from his perspective, but he explains that really well. He says, celiac disease, it's when you do the upper endoscopy, you see the damage to the villi.
Okay.
So people with a gluten intolerance, they experience the same symptoms as someone with celiac disease, but there's not the damage occurring in the small intestine.
Okay.
So celiac disease, he says, affects like 1 in 133 people. So it's more common than we realize because a lot of people carry the genes for celiac disease, but it's like a combination of environment and diet that those genes turn into celiac disease. So that's what happens.
So I could have celiac, but because of like a whole lot of other alchemy things in my body, it never activated.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's really interesting to me because I worry about my son who's younger, and he shows some symptoms that, like anemia. He has a similar build. Skin rashes and things like that are also a symptom of celiac disease. So we're actually going to have the genetic testing in my family just to know, like, should I monitor Aidan, over the years to see if it has turned into celiac disease. But if he doesn't carry the gene, then we wouldn't have to worry about it. But
yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm stuck on the idea of you having to redo your entire kitchen, which is not something I've heard of before when people get celiac. Right. But I think when I was doing some research before our conversation, I think you are the first parent I've spoken to who's had to navigate this on behalf of their child. So I can imagine the little I knew you well a while ago, and I would imagine you haven't fundamentally changed. You are an incredibly empathetic person, and you feel really deeply for people you love. So I can't imagine what not being able to quickly fix Avery's life must have felt like.
Yeah. I know there are things that you worry about anyway as a parent. You worry about your child and, socially, emotionally, how they develop, how are they doing in school? Having celiac disease, I worry about Avery. I just want her, and I've been talking to other celiac parents too. And I'll talk more about that, why I am, but I think it's really a shared experience. We just want our kids to have this normal, like growing up experience. We don't want them to feel like the outsiders. We don't want them to feel different. But because of their lifestyle, they have to do things differently. They can't play with the clay in classroom that's made of gluten and Play-Doh like other kids can, because when they were younger, it would get under their fingernails and then they would eat, and you have to worry about things like that. But birthday parties are different. We like BYOF everywhere. we
Of
bring our
course.
own
Yeah.
food.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's especially because of the cross contamination. So when she would go to birthday parties before COVID, I would always ask, well, what are you serving, and try to, so prepare whatever they're making similar for Avery, so she didn't feel strange about eating her own food.
And I'm sure
So
MasterChef was never one of your great life ambitions, and yet it has become
no,
that way.
no,
I mean, from an adult perspective, I feel like we're mocking gluten-free less and less. Like we're kind of like making fun of it a little bit less. But I know maybe like 5-6 years ago, I feel like the culture was very much like, oh, that's like a hippie California thing. Like that's not real. You're just trying to go on a diet. And I know there are people that do gluten-free that do not have any celiac intolerance. That's just a choice they're making.
Right.
But there are an emerging number of folks who have the intolerance within the community. Are you guys noticing that shift as well, or is it just because I'm not part of it?
Yeah, I mean, there will always be a group who doesn't understand because they haven't been exposed to it. And even, within I am always in the educator role, I guess, because, when Avery goes to a new friend's house and there's a mother who isn't familiar at all with celiac disease, and I'm trying to like play it off like, oh, no big deal, we'll bring her own food, and it's not a big deal. I do have to, I don't want her to be treated like this delicate flower. Like she's a strong, resilient girl, but she does have to do things differently. So it's just, I have to educate and, always be in that role too. But
yeah. And speaking of education, you've kind of formalized that a little bit with your the website with Gluten Free Avery, I believe is the website. So in the way of kind of stepping into that space for the rest of us that aren't, like if Avery came over to play with my niece, I might not remember to make the food, but I need to train myself to do that kind of thing. So talk to me a little bit more about Gluten Free Avery. What's going on?
We're excited about that. It's something that Avery and I have talked about for a while, just, I'm really proud of her because I feel like my goal with her is, I probably in any case, even if she didn't have celiac disease, I really want her to be resilient. Life happens. This isn't something she can control. It could be worse. You just have to keep going. You have to roll with it. So, with Gluten Free Avery, I really wanted to give her the opportunity to step into that and to really be an example for other kids who are struggling with the social, emotional, and physical effects of celiac disease. But I know there are a lot of, in the parent community, we are like our own investigators. We are putting the pieces together, trying to figure it out because there's still a huge gap in just the medical community and the understanding of celiac disease. And it's inconsistent, and it's, that's really challenging from the parent role. So, our goal with Gluten Free Avery is we want to help parents raise and kids to become happy, healthy, and resilient gluten-free kids. So we're trying, that's a big goal, a big mission, but we really want to bring parents together, provide, resources for parents who are just totally new and navigating the gluten-free transition. And we really want to have a space for kids to connect with other kids who are, living this lifestyle so that they feel like they're not alone. So
I know this is new. You guys just launched it.
We did.
Very recently, and we are still in the midst of the COVID. But
Right.
Is your vision for this to be largely digital, or are you hoping to do a more in-person aspect or a hybrid?
I would love to do, I think I have this big picture, like, my background in, with youth group and with, we're being a camp counselor. I'm like, I want to create this like camp where you bring kids together and they, it's gluten-free camp and it's safe. And so I have like pictures of that happening. I have pictures of like in-person events, just like educational events for parents, but also, an opportunity for kids to have that safe space to talk about like, hey, it's really difficult being different. These are the like challenges that I'm feeling. Like, my friend was teasing me the other day, or not, I guess not your friend, teasing you the other day.
That's the language they're going to use because, isn't so much of childhood figuring out who's really a friend and who's not, like the behavior of your friend. Yeah.
Right. So I see that in person, but, of course, now we're trying to, behind the scenes build this resource through Gluten Free Avery online and see where it goes. I think really keeping our, I really want to keep my eyes focused on the mission and just who we really want to help and serve with it. So yeah, we're just starting. So we'll see where it all goes, but we're excited about it.
Yeah, and we're excited to hear from you at the ground floor, so we can say we heard about this back before it was a camp.
Right.
Because I'm 100% positive you'll do that if that ends up being a good idea. So just to kind of wrap up here, just thinking there are so many of us who don't really interact with gluten-free life. Is there any kind of anything that you'd like us to know as we move through our glutenated life?
Well, I guess, one thing that I'm learning as I was sharing, reading this book is that celiac disease does affect 1 in 133 people. It is a genetic condition. So, people that are transitioning to the gluten-free lifestyle, they may be feeling the symptoms that I was talking about. So, but they may not be knowledgeable enough to know to check for celiac disease. And so I think that just in general, just awareness that people are making this transition to a gluten-free lifestyle because of the physical effect it has on them. They're, suffering from, fatigue. They're suffering from, a list of symptoms, and just to have empathy for the fact that it's not just a fad. It is a fad in some ways, but maybe it's a fad also because people are feeling these physical symptoms. And one thing I learned that was interesting from that book was that gluten is one of 3 proteins that the human body just can't digest. So our bodies just can't naturally digest it. But if you have that, if you have the genes for celiac disease, then it really turns into an issue for you. So,
Fascinating.
yeah.
And I think the thing with the fad too is, and I get this question a lot with a lot of things like pronouns and sexuality and stuff. And it's like, well, all these kids just doing all this fatty stuff. And it's like, no, this always existed before. But now that people have a name for it, and now that people can identify, oh, I'm not a hypochondriac, I'm not nuts, like I'm not, that
Right.
sounds like what I have. The
Yeah.
natural way that society works is that it's going to seem like a fad. It's going to seem like it's
Right.
everywhere all of a sudden. But
Yeah.
it's not. It's just we finally have a word and a treatment plan, and
Right.
we live in
Thank
an
God.
area of the country where there is more opportunity to buy gluten-free things than in some
Right.
other parts of the world.
Mhm.
But the more we do it here, the more it will expand to other places, and
Right.
that's kind of how society changes.
And thank God that we're advanced enough where we're at this place where we have a name for it,
Yeah.
where there is a treatment. Not, people that have celiac disease will always have celiac disease. It's not something that goes away, but glad that there's a treatment for it because, centuries ago when it existed, people died from it. So
Yeah,
it's a good thing.
I always think about that with stuff that like we are learning more about, like in the 1500s, like what did death from diabetes look like? Because obviously
Right.
it existed,
Yeah.
and
Right.
how lucky we are to be alive right now in so many
Hmm.
ways. So,
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
well, Rachel, thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to make sure that everyone, all below this video or wherever you're consuming this content, you're going to find all the ways to get in touch with Gluten Free Avery and be active on the ground floor, and also an ally of some fashion. If this is not your world, just make sure to keep an eye out for it. And if you're throwing parties, ensure there's a gluten-free option. It's not as complicated as you think it is, and it's a whole lot about acknowledging the dignity and worth of other people. So again, Rachel, thanks for joining us. And guys, I will see everybody else on the next edition of Welcome to My World.
Thank you.